Welcome back to the Vanessa G Fitcast. I'm Vanessa Gillette, and here with me today, if you're watching the video, you can see that I have traded out Omar for my better-looking feminine partner here, Miss Alex Long.
Hello. It's so good to be back in the Gillette Pozos household.
Yes, we actually in the quote-unquote podcast studio. And we're here to actually record this episode live. We wanted you to come down in person for this recording.
Just for this recording. I literally got off the plane like about an hour ago, and now we're recording a podcast.
Yeah, that's how it works around here. We're efficient with our time.
I love it.
Well, so, today we wanted to talk a little bit more about gut health. We've done a previous episode around gut health, and more specifically around, how to alleviate symptoms like constipation, diarrhea, bloating, how to really work through those things with some initial steps you can take, really more so covering the basics. Today, if it's okay with you, Alex, I want to go even like another layer deeper here and really talk about our gut health, because a lot of people may not realize what's even really going on in their gut at the end of the day. And I think this is an area of a topic that just needs a little bit more conversation around it.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I mean, I love to dive deep. I love the science. So I'm all for a gut health part 2.
Yeah. Well, so let's start, like I mentioned, we've done a previous episode where we talked a little bit more about the basics. And, before we hit record here, we were talking about how we want to talk about this topic. And I was saying like, there's a lot of people who are doing the basics already, and they're still experiencing different symptoms of gut health. And one thing that actually Omar pointed out, our producer here behind the scenes, he had pointed out that, a lot of people say that they're doing everything right. They say that they're doing the basics, but they might not actually be doing what we would be considering that kind of base layer. So, Alex, can you maybe clarify for us, like, what are really just streamline the basic things that people should be doing to really relieve some of these more common gut health symptoms?
Yeah. First and foremost, honestly, as much as it sometimes sucks, I'm not going to lie, my first recommendation is going to be tracking your food. Because if you don't have the data to support, the fact that you are in fact eating enough, you're eating enough fiber, you're eating enough insoluble fiber, soluble fiber. We talked about what the difference is between those two fibers on the last gut health podcast that we did. And you don't have evidence to support, am I truly eating at my maintenance calories? Then we're just not going to know. And now for everyone who's about to jump down my throat and say, Alex, I don't want to track my food forever, you don't have to. But even if it's just for a couple of weeks to really make sure your fiber is in check and you are eating at maintenance, that's going to be step number 1. Because we know, and I know we talked about this last time too, and I feel like it's been the topic of almost all of our conversations lately, but stress really, really impacts our gut health. It really impacts our microbiome. And undereating is probably the most common source of physical stress on the body that we see in women, we see in our clients. So if we don't have evidence to support the fact that we're not undereating, then that's going to be where I start. So if we are in fact tracking our food, we're definitely eating at maintenance. We have about, 25 to 35 grams of fiber per day, depending on, your individual body. Some people respond really well to like higher fiber intake. Some people don't. Depends how much you're eating. All of these variables are important. And we're actually looking to see the composition of your meals. Like, are we eating mostly nutrient dense foods? The lean proteins, lots of fruits, vegetables, whole grains. Then I want to talk about your stress management practices in your everyday life. Because again, I know a lot of people, women especially, who say, oh, I'm not stressed. But then you look at their day and they're getting maybe 6 hours of sleep. They are running around like a chicken with their head cut off all day, chasing toddlers, running errands. They're running a business, or they're going to work and working 12-hour shifts and doing all of these things at once. And they're never taking a break to slow down. Maybe they're not even taking a true lunch break. Maybe they're eating their MegaFit meals in the car.
All right, call me out now.
No, but seriously, I'm guilty of it too. Like I was just telling you, I'm very notorious, or I was very notorious for, scarfing down my lunch as fast as possible while I was working so that I could get back to work. And that was just my norm. But that's incredibly stressful when you look at your lifestyle as a whole. Like, what are the tools that you are or are not using to manage that physical and emotional stress? Because again, you might just get used to this lifestyle and you might think, oh, I'm not stressed. This is just my normal, but you've just gotten used to living in fight or flight, right? Like you've gotten used to living in that really stressful lifestyle. And, not even mentioning workouts, these women who are working 12-hour shifts and chasing kids all day are often doing like high intensity Orange Theory or something like that.
These women are short on times and they think, oh, I got to do these short, intense workout because that's what works for my schedule. And they don't really acknowledge the fact that there are going to be you need to take that time for yourself. You can't be just go, and then now jump into something really high intensity right off the bat as well.
Absolutely. And that's not to say that like, if you only have 30 minutes to work out 2 or 3 times a week, that's plenty. But are we doing strength training with slow and controlled movements? Are we letting our heart rate come down between sets? Are we, utilizing gentle movement like walking or yoga and stretching to really support our parasympathetic nervous system? Again, are we slowing down? Are we taking lunch breaks? Are we getting 8 hours of sleep? How much water are we drinking, right? And people think that, oh, I drink plenty of water. I have my water bottle. I carry it with me all day. But like, how much are you actually drinking?
Yeah.
If you're struggling with constipation, bloating, like that's often where I start. And again, if we don't have that data to show, okay, I'm only strength training, 2 to 3 times a week. I'm, getting 8 to 10K steps a day. I'm drinking a gallon of water. I'm getting 8 hours of sleep. I'm definitely eating at maintenance, like 2,000 plus calories easily, but I'm still really struggling. Okay. That's when we need to intervene. That's when I can confidently say that you are, in fact, like navigating the basics very well. You have the foundation and now we need to dig deeper.
Exactly. And I think a really good thing, even before we go down that path of what does it look like to actually dig deeper with your gut health, is, Alex, you had mentioned it's important to make sure that you are actually eating at maintenance calories. If this is something that you're experiencing these symptoms, we want to make sure that we are eating at maintenance, which is theoretically the amount of food that you would be able to eat consistently and maintain your body weight on, regardless of whether or not maintaining your body weight is or is not a goal. If we're working on our internal health, we need to be at maintenance calories for that as basically our baseline. And, oftentimes I'll have consultations with women and they might be familiar with this concept of eating at maintenance. And they'll even tell me, I had a call with a girl yesterday who did decide to join our team because she is seeking this type of deeper work in her internal health while also seeking body composition goals. And she wants to set herself up for that success. Yet she's extremely intelligent. She has a great baseline of knowledge when it comes to her health and her nutrition. And she told me, I've been eating at maintenance for a long time now, and I feel really, really good about that. I've been tracking consistently, at least for the last few months now. So I know for a fact that I've been at maintenance. And when I got the facts from her on the numbers that she'd been eating, and of course, I only have a certain amount of data on her from this point, from this consultation. But right off the bat, I told her, I don't think you're actually at your maintenance calories. I think that you are under projecting what your true maintenance can be. And that's where I find for a lot of women, it's really, really hard because we might say, oh, I feel like this is my max capacity of what I can eat. I feel like if I eat more, I'm probably going to gain weight. I'm probably going to overshoot my maintenance, because we tend to undershoot because we're deep down, we're nervous of overeating. We're afraid of gaining weight. We have these just voices in our head that are telling us of like, don't eat too much, don't eat too much. And so that's where having the eyes of a third party who is objective and truly wants the best for you, they're not going to misguide you. They're not going to be like, haha, I'm going to make you gain more weight and make you just eat a ton of food and trick you. Like, no, they truly want you to feel better. They truly want to help solve your issues. And so they're going to actually guide you and make sure that you are eating enough so that we can solve those gut health and hormone health and other issues that are being exacerbated by under eating and stressing your body.
And it's important to point out too, like especially someone who is experienced and really knowledgeable with this sort of thing, like probably has gone online and calculated their estimated maintenance calories, right? You enter in your height, your weight, the calculator uses a fancy equation that's actually really old and outdated and it spits out a number based on your activity activity level, and maybe you are in fact eating, the 2100 calories. I use this example for my clients all the time. If I were to enter my height, weight, and activity level in one of those TDEE calculators, I think it predicts my maintenance at like 2100 calories. And I know for a fact that I can eat 2500 easily without gaining weight, because that's just where my metabolism is at, and I've worked hard to get there, right? But when you are having some of these more functional health issues going on, these deeper issues, especially with gut health or adrenal health we talked about, oftentimes your true maintenance is higher than what those calorie counters predict. Even if you're not having like these internal gut health issues, like it's usually higher. And that is when someone who is knowledgeable, professional, who can take you through a proper reverse diet to actually get your metabolism to its true maintenance and help your body adapt to that amount of food is really, really important. But regardless, even if you are tracking your food, you're eating the 2100 calories every single day, one of my recommendations very well may be, let's eat a little bit more, because your body has been under so much stress and we need that extra energy. We need those extra nutrients to heal our gut lining, to help balance our microflora, and to get to the bottom of these symptoms.
Exactly. And that's such a good point too. It doesn't, at the end of the day, just come down to your calories, your macronutrients, your carbs, fats, your proteins. It really does come down to your micronutrients as well. We need to get our body the nutrients it needs to restore that gut lining. And at times, if you're already having trouble absorbing these nutrients, we might have to just feed you up. We might have to give you extra of those nutrients to ensure that you are able to absorb what you need. And that's okay if we have to go a little bit higher, if that's what your body needs.
Yep.
We got to listen to your body at the end of the day. Well, so, Alex, let's talk a little bit more then about, okay, what if, we covered those boxes, like we're doing the stress management, we're eating at true maintenance calories, we really are just checking all the boxes of what should theoretically be solving my gut health symptoms. I'm potentially still having diarrhea or constipation or bloat or GERD or acid reflux, just these different types of symptoms. What next? What do I do from there?
Yeah, so at that point, we have one of two options. We can do some sort of elimination diet. We can remove really common inflammatory triggers like gluten, dairy. Alcohol is a big one for a lot of people. I have a couple of clients that I've done this with, and we essentially cut out those really common inflammatory triggers, assuming that the person is eating dairy and gluten and drinking alcohol on a moderately regular basis. We can take those out. We can, go gluten and dairy free for a couple of weeks, see if symptoms improve. And if they do, okay, we might be onto something, right? Now let's add gluten back in very slowly, strategically. If, we're still not having any symptoms, we're not having diarrhea, we're not having bloating, we don't have a reaction to that gluten. Okay, now let's add dairy back in, kind of monitor the symptoms. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. And you may have also heard of the low FODMAP diet. I don't know if anyone listening has heard of that, especially if you've been diagnosed with IBS. That's a whole other podcast. But FODMAPs are a type of oligosaccharide or carbohydrate that is difficult for our body to digest, and it can sometimes cause, or they can sometimes cause excess gas, excess fermentation in the gut, excess bloating, found in things like beans, onions, garlic, certain vegetables, cruciferous vegetables. And I actually remember the first time that I ever started having really severe GI issues. I had no idea what was going on. I was actually in school studying to be a dietitian. And I went to another dietitian and I was like, hey, I'm doing all of these things. Granted, yes, I was a really stressed out college student, but did she talk to me about that? No. She basically just gave me a list of low FODMAP foods. Yep. Follow this diet forever and, be on your merry way. And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to vow to never be that type of dietitian because essentially, eliminating these FODMAP foods, it's not sustainable. That's eliminating 90% of all of the foods that you probably love to eat. And it's not going to solve your problem. It's not getting to the root cause. Right. And the same thing with gluten and dairy. Ideally, sure. We've talked about this in your protocols that I know we'll talk about on this podcast too, but even though these foods can be inflammatory and they can be triggers, and, lactose intolerance is real. If you're not making enough lactose or lactase to digest the lactose in your intestines, that's a genetic thing. I'm lactose intolerant. Like, that's a real thing that we can't really overcome without taking lactate. But still, like, ideally, I want you to be able to have these foods in moderation whenever you want, without having these severe gut health symptoms like severe diarrhea, severe bloating. And again, like, there are special cases like celiac disease, lactose intolerance, but still, like, for the average person, elimination diets are not the long-term solution.
Yes.
And so usually, rather than going that route, I order a GI map. And a GI map is essentially a stool testing kit that I will ship to your house. And Vanessa, I know you know.
You poop in a box.
You poop in a box. It's a very intimate experience. You literally have to, like, scoop it up.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about the process.
I know. But essentially, it's a stool testing kit. And the way that they analyze your stool, a GI map, it actually stands for Gastrointestinal Microbial Assay Plus, GI Map Plus. And the plus is usually some add-on things that I'll talk about for intestinal permeability. But it essentially is used to determine what microbes are present in your gut and in what quantities. It actually works by copying the microbe's DNA in the sample, and then, like, copying it over and over and over again, kind of blowing up this sample, so you can get a really clear picture of the microbes that are in your gut, and have, specific reference ranges to look at and see where you fall, like, within those reference ranges. We can see, like, if the microbe is even present. We can see if it's overgrown. And it looks at, like, I think there's like 12 pages worth of data. It looks at, your regular microbiome, like the healthy keystone bacteria that are supposed to be in your gut. It looks at the pathogenic bacteria, parasites, some of the opportunistic bacteria, like, that are real, like, hydrogen producers. That's actually an indication that you may have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, so SIBO. GI map can't diagnose SIBO, but if we do see a high presence of those hydrogen producers in your stool, then we can kind of assume that it is overgrowing in your small intestine. It's looking at, like, your steatocrit, so fat in your stool. It's looking at your pancreatic enzyme function. It also looks at, like, immune modulators, inflammatory markers. We can see if you're having an inflammatory or autoimmune response in your gut. And we can look at that. This is the add-on that I was talking about that I always add on to somebody's GI map. It's called zonulin, and it's a marker of intestinal permeability. And if we have high zonulin in our stool, then we can assume that we're having some sort of gut integrity issue that's causing some inflammation. It looks at so many things, and it's crazy, like, what you can get from one tiny sample, right? But that is really, like, the next level. Like, okay, this is the next step that I will take for somebody that is checking all of those boxes and still doesn't know what's wrong. Maybe they don't eat a lot of gluten or dairy or alcohol, and it's like, okay, let's just really see what's going on in your gut, because I've gotten GI maps back that all look extremely different. Like, some have H. pylori, some have parasites, some have, an overgrowth of those opportunistic bacteria, some have a mix of, like, all of it, and all of their symptoms are kind of the same. Bloating, diarrhea. Maybe someone with H. pylori has GERD, acid reflux, that is, supposed to be this, trademark symptom of H. pylori. Another person with H. pylori might not have GERD. So, like, it just depends. And we can't make any decisions until we have that data from the test.
Yeah. And that's what I think is the most just, like, interesting thing. And, like, the thing that we have to really drive home from this is that you can have, like, that's why it's almost limited on the amount of, like, symptoms that you could have from these different types of gut health issues. But the amount of different types of issues that could be going on is, like, almost endless. And each of these different things needs a different type of treatment protocol. And that's where so many people are misled, is they just express, okay, I'm experiencing these IBS symptoms, or I'm experiencing just, chronic bloating. And maybe they go to a doctor or a dietitian, or maybe they just Google search, or they go on Instagram and they just see a little graphic that says, if you're experiencing bloat, cut out these foods, do these couple of things. And they do that. and nothing ever changes. And then maybe they find something else that says cut out these foods, and it's a different list of foods. I'm like, all right, I'm going to try this now. And maybe now they see something of like, oh, no, you just need to add in these probiotics, or you need to add in this and that. And they might not realize that maybe they even have something going on that now they're exacerbating the symptoms because, like we can talk about with my experience of like, you actually had me now with my H. pylori protocol, remove probiotics, remove fermented foods, which I was eating a lot of sauerkraut because I had known, and it's true, that sauerkraut is great for a healthy gut. Mm-hmm. It is great for a healthy gut. For a gut that was in my condition, it actually could be making my issues worse.
Yeah.
And that's where there needs to be education.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I think it's important to remember that like a GI map is really interesting, especially like if you're a data nerd like me, or you're just really interested in learning more about your health, how your body works. Like you might have seen some of this research coming out on the gut microbiome and how it relates to your metabolic resistance, your body composition. And I've had clients like come ask me like, hey, what's a GI map? I've heard you talk about that before. Like, I'm really interested in gut health, especially over the holidays. I had one client where like their family was talking about some other like stool sampling thing, like other company. Yes. And I'm like, okay, well, what technology are they using? Like, what exactly are they testing? Like, do they have any information on their website? The answers were no, and I don't know. Yeah. And so, then I can provide education on what exactly a GI map is. And, someone would say, oh, I'm really interested in that. Like, can you order it for me? Like, I have gut issues. I want to know what's going on. And I'm like, hold on. Like, one, they're kind of pricey. They're worth it. Absolutely. But let's back up. Let's ask ourselves, do we really need a GI map yet? Or can we go back to the basics first?
Exactly. That's where the solution isn't just, that's why we don't just externally just order GI maps for people and be like, here, go interpret this on your own and take this because you said you want it. That's where the coaching comes in. Of you might be like, oh, I'm interested in this, but we can make recommendations. We might say, well, let's do XYZ first to try and alleviate your symptoms. Let's eliminate these other things that are completely free to do before we go down this path of testing.
Yeah. And you were a perfect candidate for the GI map, honestly, because I know you. And I've seen your food logs. You track your food consistently. You've been eating at now your true maintenance for a really long time. You eat very nutrient-dense foods. We've worked on a lot of stress management protocols over the last year that you're actively implementing on a regular basis, and you were still having some issues, some bloating, some weird diarrhea here and there. So we got you a GI map. We actually got you a second GI map recently to compare it to your first one. And I'd love to talk about that experience with you, because I remember when I first opened that and then I compared it to your first one, I was like, oh shit, like she still has an overgrowth of H. pylori that we weren't able to get rid of. So now I'm kind of putting my problem solving puzzle brain hat on, like, okay, why is this? What did we miss? What did I miss? What's different? What's improved? What's changed? What can we change about your lifestyle and of course your supplement routine to really finally like tackle the root cause of this H. pylori overgrowth?
Yeah. So of course I can talk about what my experience was like of you giving me different protocols, but maybe let's just, high level talk about like if somebody potentially they are aware that they do have H. pylori. Maybe they've just been put on antibiotics for it and that's pretty much it. And now they're still experiencing symptoms. I know we've had clients come to us with this exact thing of, I'm thinking of a client specifically who she had H. pylori. She went through 2 rounds of antibiotics, I believe, still was experiencing symptoms. And part of her was just thinking that this is just my norm. This is just like how I am. I know when I talked to her about this recently, and she was, we were kind of sharing a shared experience of both of us come from families of just a history of gut health problems. We come from a family that, maybe being gassy is just like a normal thing. And you just think, oh, this is the norm, burp a lot after meals. That's just how we are. And, these different things that we think are normal. And both of us even have grandparents who have actually passed away from cancers in the GI tract. And like we have this history of gut health problems in our family. And part of it was truly just, this is just how we are. Mm-hmm. We didn't realize that there are things that we can actually take next level to treat these things and to improve. And I know my quality of life has improved immensely in the last year since we've begun treating these things, and we're not even completely done. We're actually in the midst of my H. pylori protocols now. So I guess, Alex, just maybe tell us a little bit about what does that look like to treat H. pylori? What are we doing now?
Yeah, well, first I do want to touch on, like, if you're in that situation, if you've been diagnosed with H. pylori in the past, or you've taken antibiotics, for some intestinal overgrowth in the past, and now you're coming, still having some of these GI issues, it's really important to remember that antibiotics specifically will kill off all of the bacteria in your gut, not just the bad bacteria, not just the H. pylori. We don't have antibiotics that are meant to target just H. pylori or just this bacteria yet. So some of her symptoms could be coming from the fact that now she doesn't even have good bacteria in her gut. We have to re-inoculate her with a high quality probiotic. H. pylori in particular actually does impair your stomach lining. That's why heartburn and like GERD, reflux, stomach ulcers are really common with H. pylori overgrowth, because it actually destroys like your gut mucosa. So like the cell lining, the lining that protects your stomach from the hydrochloric acid. It can over time impair your ability to secrete hydrochloric acid, resulting in impaired digestion of foods, resulting in bloating, diarrhea, constipation. So for her specifically, we actually started with just a digestive enzyme that had some berberine HCl to kind of like supplement. And again, we're also recommending high quality probiotics to re-inoculate her. And her diarrhea improved within a couple of weeks of just taking the probiotics, the enzymes now with, at least 2 meals a day. And we started reverse dieting her. So now she's feeding her body the nutrients, the calories, the energy, the micronutrients that she actually needs to heal. And her symptoms got a lot better, which was really, really cool to see. But if I get someone's GI map back and I see maybe like, let's say the only thing that they have flagged here is an overgrowth of H. pylori, first we have to look at their symptoms. Like I mentioned earlier, someone with an overgrowth of H. pylori may be experiencing a lot of acid reflux. So we want to look at foods that really commonly trigger that. Chocolate, peppermint, onions, garlic are some of the ones just off the top of my head. So we would probably remove those for a little while, kind of calm the stomach acid there. Some people, again, you were one of those people that had an overgrowth that didn't have any GERD symptoms, so we didn't necessarily have to cut out those foods. But essentially the stages, like I guess I would say like the 2 or 3 stages of healing our gut in an instance like this. Like first we have to kill off the bad bacteria, right? And we have to calm the system. We have to remove any of the triggering inflammatory foods. Then like for 4 to 6 weeks when we're on that kill off phase, now we're going to re-inoculate and replenish. Now we're going to bring in those fermented foods, the digestive enzymes again, the quality probiotics, add in some of these foods that we had previously removed, and really make sure that we're stable, right? So for you in particular, I think I recommended oregano oil, mastic gum, or xylitol gum. I know you have a supplement with mastic gum in it to help kill off the H. pylori, but there's actually gum called Pure Gum or Spry mouthwash that I recommended to both you and Omar.
Actually have my Pure Gum
yes,
right here.
Show it in the video. But yeah, so when I started to do some digging here, I learned that H. pylori actually lives in your mouth. The mouth can become a reservoir for H. pylori, and especially if you have a partner, you're most likely basically giving it to each other.
Swapping it back and forth.
Swapping it back and forth. Because it does live in your mouth. It lives in your saliva. So that's very easy to spread, right? And if one person is being treated for H. pylori and trying to kill it off, but the other person has H. pylori, the other partner, you may not get rid of it no matter how strictly you're following your protocols, because your partner has it too.
So just stay single, ladies.
Just stay single. Don't get married. But no, seriously, that's why I recommended the gum and the mouthwash to both you and Omar, to make sure that we're, cleaning out that reservoir on a regular basis. I know garlic oil is another common one. It's a natural antimicrobial. And I recommended I think it was the Interface Plus,
yes,
the biofilm disruptor. Yes. So H. pylori, and this is what I think happened with you. H. pylori can develop these biofilms in our mucosa. They're kind of like little colonies of the H. pylori that actually live in the cell lining. And if we don't disrupt that biofilm that's kind of protecting the colony of H. pylori, then you're still going to have this H. pylori that's just sort of living in your system. And if at some point, maybe because of stress or maybe because of some other GI irritant like NSAIDs, I know we've removed NSAIDs because that's a common irritant for the cell lining. eventually these biofilms might rupture on their own. The H. pylori spreads again, and now we're having symptoms because we never killed it all off in the first place. So I added that to your regimen. I talked about high histamine foods and how H. pylori really feed off of histamine. Fermented foods, since we know we have an overgrowth, we can't be giving our body the microbes the foods that they really love, because now we're just feeding the overgrowth, right? So we're removing that. And essentially, I told you, we're also doing the GI Revive supplement and the L-glutamine. So GI Revive contains a little bit more of an intensive formula. It has some things like aloe vera, marshmallow root, licorice have all been proven to really help stabilize the gut lining and heal the mucosa, heal the cell walls, and help heal intestinal permeability. Usually intestinal permeability results from chronic stress, inflammation, and sometimes bacterial overgrowth. So I like to start with L-glutamine if we can get that GI map back, or sometimes we can even see it on the Dutch test, like if there's an indication of gut dysbiosis or some kind of intestinal permeability issue going on. L-glutamine is the primary amino acid responsible for healing those tight junctions in our intestines, healing that intestinal permeability. So I recommend that. If that doesn't work, I'll go to something stronger like the GI Revive, and I think we have you on both. But
I'm the problem child.
Essentially all of that. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that was about it. And honestly, you know, I for our listeners, I know that at this point you might have just completely zoned out, because this is a lot. We're getting into the
I went
science,
on a tangent.
and it's wonderful. And I know that there's a lot of people that need this information, but I also just want to emphasize too that I know that when we start to talk about the gut and about these types of things, it can become overwhelming. Like you can quickly tune out because you're like, I don't even know what to do with this information. And so, you know, really, before we even wrap up here, I just want to go ahead and extend that to our listeners too, of if any of this stuff, like you're experiencing gut health issues, you are, you know, at least to what you believe, you feel like you are checking the boxes that we talked about in the beginning, like you are doing the right things, and you're still just experiencing symptoms, and you are starting to wonder, maybe this isn't normal. Maybe, you know, my gassiness, my burping, my bloat, my, you know, maybe even occasional constipation or diarrhea, you're starting to realize that maybe this isn't normal. Maybe this is something that's treatable and that can improve my quality of life if I'm not experiencing these things forever. Well, honestly, just reach out to me. Send me a message on Instagram. I am more than happy to get you scheduled with a free consultation call just to see if we can offer you any help and if we can get you some free resources, or I'll be honest with you, if I think that coaching is a necessary next step for you, and we can talk about what that could look like for you as well.
And really quick though, like I'm so glad that you brought that up because it's so true. And I also just want to emphasize, like, all of those things that I just mentioned, all of those supplements, like, you were a severe case, you know, but even so, like, even if you're not necessarily a severe case, but you do end up needing some sort of gut health healing protocol, hormone healing protocol, the supplements, the recommendations, the time frame, it can be overwhelming. It can be a lot. It's a lot of science. But I always want to stress that it's only temporary, right? You are in the very beginning phases of your H. pylori kill off phase, right? I only want you on all of these supplements for 4 to 6 weeks max. And then I want to wean you off of the supplements. I want to make sure your symptoms have improved. I want to add in these other foods back in to make sure that you're okay and you're responding well to kind of, you know, graduating back to a normal diet so that you can confidently say the next time we do a GI map, right? Okay, H. pylori is gone, symptoms are gone, stress on the system is lower, gut health inflammation is lower, and now I'm set for life because I know what to do to make sure this doesn't happen again. Mm-hmm. That's my goal for you. I promise it's not going to be all of those supplements, all of those pills, and all of these protocols forever.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, so honestly, Alex, I think at this point we probably are just going to have to do another episode at some point with talking more about this, because there are so many paths we can go down here. But if this episode has been helpful for you, please do me a favor, screenshot this, share it on your story, spread the word for others of gut health and just the information that needs to be known, that needs to be shared. And if this is something that you're struggling with, like I said, shoot me a message. You can just privately DM me on Instagram and we can chat more about this and see if we can offer you any kind of help or support or just any advice, give you some clarity there. Alex, before we wrap this episode up, is there any last words of advice or anything that you wanted to share on this topic?
No, I honestly think this was a great conversation. And again, I know I mentioned this in the last gut health podcast that we did, but these symptoms that you're struggling with are not normal, and you don't have to live like this forever. And if it ends up being a case where you do need more of that, functional, holistic approach, you might really benefit from a GI map. Don't be scared. Don't be scared to reach out. Don't be scared to admit that maybe this is the next level help that you really need and that would set you up for the rest of your life. Because I'm telling you, I've seen it. I've seen it in you. I've seen it in our clients. Like, it is so worth it. And it's amazing when I see clients like really start to understand the science and feel so empowered in their knowledge. Like, hey, I know exactly what's going on in my body. I know these protocols are only temporary. I'm going to do it. I'm feeling better. And now I can spread the word and help others.
Relief it's worth $1 million. I'm telling you, it really does just change your life when you're not dealing with gut health symptoms anymore. Well, Alex, thank you so much for joining us live in person and sharing your knowledge as always. And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for listening, and we will be back next week.